Is it on our end yet? So let's see. And it does say it's on our end. We're live. Great. Okay, so welcome to Authors Alcove for Fantasy Writers, where we explore the magic of storytelling, the magic of storytelling, dive deep into the craft of world building, and connect with authors who bring fantastical worlds to life. I am your host, Agnes Wolf, and whether you're a seasoned fantasy writer or just starting out, this is the place for inspiration, tips, and resources to help you on your writing journey. Today, we are going to be interviewing an author about their book, The Sinister Love, A Sinister Love. It is a new adult urban fantasy. His name, you can see him right there, is Spencer Hixon.
Yep.
Sorry about that. He is a dark fantasy, this is a dark fantasy novel with unique psychological twists and deeply human themes. I have actually only just started it, but I'm very interested because it deals with is it demons or is that what they are?
Yeah, demons and angels and humans.
Okay. And there's somebody who looks like they just lost their job. So
Oh yes.
it's
Desk job in purgatory.
yes, it is a very from the just beginning, it is very cute. But I want to just dive right into the questions. Spencer, your studies dive deep into psychological issues like depression, PTSD, and narcissism. How do you incorporate those themes into your world building without overwhelming the fantastical elements?
That's usually part of the character development, although it will sometimes become a plot point. I don't really know how it works. I get an inspiration and I start to work through it. Um, and sometimes, like in the my latest book, which comes out in May, the main character, I noticed this theme going on. I realized, you know what? He has PTSD. And so I did some research and then I was able to represent it better. Things like that.
See, I actually have ADHD, PTSD, and a few other things. I feel like my PTSD is pretty much healed at this point. I have worked really hard on that. But so I really appreciate when people bring those things to light. And you yourself have ADHD, and I'm sure
Yes.
it's shaped your journey as a writer. How do you feel like that has shaped you as a writer?
Well, part of having ADHD, you do have usually you have a more robust imagination. You can pull from different things more quickly because it's just your brain is going everywhere. However, it does hurt. I went without medication for a long time. Uh, I started writing my book in 2011. I didn't get published until 2024. Most of that was not writing. Most of that was ADHD taking over. Um, and then in I think 2020, yeah, in 2020, I decided I was done. I was done making excuses for myself. So I did all the things I knew you were supposed to do. I got a personal trainer because if I didn't get a personal trainer, I would never go to the gym. I got a therapist. I got medicated for ADHD, and they diagnosed me with depression and then medicated that. And then I finished it in a month. And then the next two books I finished in 5 months each. So yeah, it makes a big difference to be medicated.
I am not medicated. I will say that I'm hesitant to take anything from that. But I do have to say that I wish that I wish that I was able to focus. But the one thing my husband says, like, because I have gone back and forth on being medicated, and I am very curious. You're kind of making me question whether I should be medicated. I'm just hesitant to. But one thing that my husband does say about ADHD, because I get very frustrated with myself, I forget things, I do all of those
Hmm.
things. And sometimes I feel like that I am a malfunctioning human being. But he also mentions that I have a lot of qualities that other people do not have because of my ADHD. And I love that you touched on that. We have more of a robust imagination. So, what were some of the challenges and what were some of the advantages of having ADHD and your writing?
A lot of the challenges, well, often I'm actually a perfectionist because of it. I don't want to have to make a mistake. Um, and so that is a challenge because perfectionism is the enemy of being done. Um, I also obviously having problems with focusing, uh, and sometimes I would have problems with memory, trying to remember something, and I would go back through the book and look and oh, I already did that. Or I'll be editing the book and I'm like, oh no, this needs to go in there. And then a line later I did that. I'm like, oh. Uh yeah, but as far as advantages, yes, the imagination is a big one. Also the ability to just quickly go from one subject to another, or wanting to delve deep into a specific subject because I've kind of touched on it a little bit in the book. And so you can hyper focus on things like that. Oh, the hyper focus definitely is one as well. Like I'll need to get my audiobook done and I will do it for like 12 hours a day.
So did you do the speaking for the your audiobook?
Yes.
Ah, awesome. Awesome. I didn't know if you hired, that was a question I was going to ask later. So one thing that I think that really helps with the ADHD is the hyperfocus. Like I think because like I can
Yes.
just get immersed and I block everything else out while I'm typing. But I one of the biggest ones that you mentioned that I struggle with is the memory. And that has that improved with your medication?
Um, Somewhat. Yeah. I mean, the medication can only take care of some of it. It's not going to get rid of all of your ADHD, and I don't want it to. Um, but yeah, it has helped somewhat with the memory, but not as much as I would like.
So, one of the aspects that I'm very curious about your book, A Sinister Love, is each demon has a particular sin that caused their fall, and your characters grapple with mental health struggles. How did you do your research and integrate these psychological conditions to ensure they feel authentic, and what gave you that inspiration?
Well, for the sins, I think it's just kind of came about as I was going through writing the characters and realized this character really does represent one core concept. And so the main character, she fell because of cowardice. She ran away when she shouldn't have. And that's not a huge sin. So she has a very light sin on her soul. But one of the other characters, he fell because he was overly ambitious, always trying to push the other people down and one up everyone. And so I was able to look into that and focus on them. It also helps that some of the characters are traditional. The seven princes of hell, Belphegor and Leviathan and Asmodeus, and they each represent a specific capital sin. So that helps. Um, as for and this one, depression, the main character has depression, and I suffered from depression as well. And that one kind of came about through necessity. As I'm writing the book, there was problem with some of the plot, and it wasn't quite matching up. And I realized that if he has this issue, then it would actually help pull things together. And this issue started to form into something like depression. And I went, well, let's research depression and find out how I can best represent this. Um,
What kind of research did you do about the depression?
Well, I started online. You do a little bit on obviously Wikipedia or Google or something, but then I like to go to the sources on the Wikipedia page. Don't let people tell you Wikipedia is not good. Go down to the sources and look there. That has tons of good stuff. And I found something called the DM5 or the DMS5. I'm sure I'm butchering it for people, but it's the current Bible for therapy and things like that. And just keeping up with that, there are some websites that are like hospitals and things. So I like to make certain that my sources are at least reliable sources.
I know there's a huge comorbidity between ADHD and depression. And
Mhm.
I think there's lots of reasons why I think that is the case, but I do know that there is a huge comorbidity there. But your books also have unique names and mythological influences. Can you share what some of those names are and what inspired you to name them?
The main character is Scribble, and I was thinking of the main character needs to just be like a little bundle of nervousness who also can like maybe have creativity. And so I was thinking of drawing. I'm like, well, what is bad drawing? It's a scribble. And I was like, oh, that makes a great name. But she also, before she fell, she had a different name. Before she fell, her name was Milani, which means ink in Greek. I like to do things like that. And I have them for all of the characters. Rotworm is her mentor. That one is kind of based on the Screwtape Letters from C.S. Lewis. There's Wormwood and Screwtape. Uh, yeah, it kind of came together. I have a Grimtooth is one. Fire Mange is only mentioned once in this one, but she's in another one. And Slytongue is a succubus.
I love doing that as well. Like you'll if people were to research like because mine have dragons and then they're people and then there's a past people too. That's hard. That's very rough. But I have to have those names kind of tie in, and only I know what those will be like because some of them will are not obvious. They'd have to like look research like Greek stuff
Oh yeah.
to know like those hidden things. And I love when other authors do that. Like, okay, I have to say this, Harry Potter. I loved when I caught on to a couple of them, and then I started doing more research because I was in college when I first started reading those. And I ended up catching on to some of the other things. And I'm like, I think it was Sirius was the
Hmm.
first one that I caught on. I was like, that's a mythological creep. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, she does this for like everything.
Everyone, yeah.
So I love when authors do that. So I'm very excited I'll have to look into what some of yours names mean. Um, why did you choose to go as an indie author rather than going traditional publishing?
So I actually tried to do traditional publishing for a while, and there's a huge process. You're writing various cover letters. You are researching all the different agents or publishers and trying to tweak your stuff towards them. It's a lot of work, and I must have mailed it off to 20 people, and maybe three of them would come back and say, "Hey, I really like your work. Send me more." Or, "Hey, it's between yours and one other." And then they would all say no. And I was like, my work is better than that. I've seen what you publish, and I know why you chose what you chose. It's not because it's good, it's because you think it will sell and that you can sell it. And I was like, well, my book needs to be out there. It's better than that. And so I was like, I'm going to go do it. And I have a friend who owns a press, so or a publishing company. And so I approached him, and he looked at the book and he said that he'd like to do it.
What publishing company does he have, or are you allowed to share that?
Oh yeah, it's Pharos Publishing. Well, it's a Wooten Major Publishing, and Pharos is a subsidiary of it.
And do they just do fantasy, or what genres do they do?
So Pharos is mostly going to be fantasy and sci-fi, while Wooten does pretty much everything. He's got some nonfiction in there as well.
And then one thing I was excited to ask you about was your audiobook. So first of all, the first question was, did you do it yourself? And I'm excited that you did. And then the second one was, what was that process like for you?
It can be frustrating, um, having to do a lot of research again because that's what I do. Uh, Learning how do I get the right environment to have the right sound. And I ended up sitting in the closet, my little tiny closet with clothes around me, and a microphone right up near my face. But then I learned, oh, you make little mouth clicky sounds all the time, and your brain just filters it out. Unless, of course, you're listening to an audiobook or have headphones on. And so I had to learn a little bit of audio engineering to learn how to remove those things, to change volumes of things. There's actually a lot that I started to learn with it. And I mean, I can do it now.
So that's one thing that I'm gonna have to look into because where I used to live in Michigan, there was a whole studio that I was able to do my podcast in. And I have tried so many different microphones and all of this, and I'm not finding one. Like, obviously, this is not the greatest quality right now. And if you listen to past things, they were a much better quality. But I'm like, I need to learn that stuff. That is something that I want to learn. And I love that you took that on. So, was it difficult to make it or to, how do I word that question? Was it difficult to because, like, obviously, the reading part, you can just read it and then, you make voices. I'm assuming you have different voices for different characters. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so like, if you're talented in that, I'm sure that probably comes, but what about the actual um, putting it out there onto Audible and stuff? What was that process like for you?
Well, that's part of where having an indie publisher helps. I'm not just self-published, and so he actually knows different avenues to take for doing that. So most of it was my publisher doing it. Unfortunately, so if you want to be on Audible, which is, the number one name, you have to meet their requirements. And I did a lot of work to make certain I met their requirements, and they took it and they accepted it. And that was a year ago, and they still haven't put it up. So we he's looking into what's gone on, because I don't know, that's kind of unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I am very curious about that. I do know other people have had a little bit of trouble with that, but I'm not sure what their catch up was or what their hiccup was. But those particular people do now have it on there. I don't know how long it took, but I know it took them. They said it took an unusually long time, is what they had said. And I didn't ask at the time what the unusually long time is. But so yours is not yet on Audible, even though they have accepted it and
Yeah, but it is on a bunch of other ones, like Spotify and Google, audiobooks.com. My website has a list of all the ones that you can get it from.
And another thing that I found very um, interesting is that you have hyperphantasia, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, and then your wife and daughter have aphantasia. First of all, we'll want to know what those mean, but I also want to know like how that has affected your storytelling.
So most people, they have a pretty decent imagination. If I ask you to imagine an apple or someone eating an apple, you won't have much of a problem doing that. Someone with aphantasia, they might not be able to imagine all the apple or even someone's face. And certain levels, you actually can't have any kind of visual imagination at all. Uh, and so my daughter, she can't imagine an entire apple. On the other end of the spectrum are people with hyperphantasia. These are people who they can do an entire song in their head with different voices and change key halfway through. Or they'll be able to give you, instead of the apple, we'll give you the whole orchard, and I'll give you the backstory of every one of the workers in it and the smell of the diesel fumes coming from the distance and the breeze. Yeah, so having this large imagination, able to do a lot of different things, and it helps visualize in my head what I'm trying to describe. And then that gives me more options for how do I want to try to tell this? Do I want to try to be more poetic, or do I just get the nitty gritty out there, or things like that?
How did you find out that you were hyperphantasia or
Well,
phantasia?
hyperphantasiac? I don't know. Well, my daughter came home from school one day and she asked, Dad, can you imagine someone's face? I was like, yeah. And she's like, I can't. It's like, what? And so, me being who I am, I researched and I found out all about aphantasia and hyperphantasia. And then I saw these tests online that you can take to see if you have hyperphantasia. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting.
I definitely do not have hyperphantasia. And like you have me wondering, do I have the other? Because I do struggle a little bit, especially with drawing. I have to actually look at something. But I'm very curious, but I probably do not. You said that only like you said 3% have hyperphantasia and 3%
2% have
have
aphantasia, yeah.
aphantasia. So you actually have, we're switching gears again. You actually have a second book coming out. It's called A Fate and Fortune. Is it the sequel to this or is it a separate standalone?
So it's not the direct sequel. It is a separate standalone kind of. They're both in the same universe. So technically, it is the second book in the overarching series that is the universe, but it's the first in its particular series with the characters that it introduces, if that makes sense. Kind of like Discworld. You have all of Discworld, but then you have the ones that are just talking about Rincewind.
All right, so I am going to be wrapping up here. I have two more questions for you. The first one is kind of a fun one. I have fraternal twins, and I actually nanny two sets of twins. And I have known many, many twins. We even had identical twins be our business partners and other areas. So I'm very fascinated by twins. You are an identical twin.
I am.
Do you have any fun stories about switching places or fooling people?
People often ask that. I actually have something online I call Twin Fashions, where I answer questions like, "What's it like being a twin?" I don't know. What's it like not being a twin? If I punch you, will he feel it? I'm like, no, but you will when I punch you back. Uh, but we never actually switched places, and mainly that's because I actually wanted to pass my classes. He's actually more artistic than I am, like drawing and computer art, while I'm much better with words than he is. And so we can actually kind of complement each other really well. We're working together on some projects right now that I'm excited about. But oh, there is one story. He didn't tell anyone. We never remember to tell anyone that we're a twin. When you grow up, it's obvious. He's right next to me. And so I never remember, hey, by the way, I'm a twin. Bye. Uh, so he didn't tell any of his friends when he was in Atlanta that he has a twin. And when he was graduating, I took his hat, and I have facial hair. He didn't. And so I went up and pretended I was him, and everyone looked at me like, "Oh, hey, David. Yeah, wow. Well, when did you grow that out?" And then my brother comes in the other side, and they all freak out.
That's crazy. What's really funny, I don't know, because like I had identical twins that were I was pretty good friends with growing up. And so like I don't know if like I can just tell twins apart more than other people because of that. But I do know that my one of my bosses was an identical twin. And when I ran into her, like people would confuse the two, and I was like, I can tell them apart. But then if you ask me like how to tell them apart, I could not tell you. What are some things that you guys have difference besides the facial hair that people can tell you apart?
Well, he has a scar on his head. So if we're not counting the scar, he has a little bit more weight, and that is actually pretty typical for twins. You usually have one that's a little bit larger. Um, our voices are a little bit different. Our mannerisms are quite different. So if you see him actually talking or doing something, you're like, oh yeah, that's David. And sometimes my wife will look at me and say, "Don't do that. You look like David for a minute." I'm like, well, I look like him all the time.
Not to her though. Sorry, I put
Yeah.
it on mute. My dog is back here whining, and that is
Oh,
why I had to put on the mutes for other people who were saw my lips move. I've been putting on the mute because I don't know if you can hear it. Anyway, I do want to ask you one last question. We do have to wrap up here. What is, so you've done the indie experience. What is one thing that you wish you would have known before you began the journey?
honestly, it's that I wish I had taken the medication and all of that stuff 13 years ago. Because then I would be a lot further than I am. But I would also say, uh, give it a good college try, go for it, and then don't give up. If you feel that can't keep up with that, but you still want to get the book out there, go do it. I actually make more money than an author who gets traditionally published because they get pennies for every book, and I'm getting dollars for every book.
That's the biggest thing that I hear almost like I have talked to people who have gone from self-publishing to traditional, and then they chose to go back because of that. And some of them do like the traditional because there are some perks there. But most of them, probably partly because of who I'm interviewing too, have chosen to go back. And then there are many people I've talked to who started out traditional and now will never go back traditional because they make more money. They say they don't sell as many books, but they make more money being
Yeah.
self-published.
And
And
a lot of them I've noticed do both. They'll have like this series is traditional and all the other things I do are is me.
well, I just want to thank you again so much, Spencer, for sharing your journey and insights with us today. Your approach to blending psychological depth with fantasy storytelling is inspiring, and I loved being able to talk about ADHD with you. If you're interested by Spencer's work, A Sinister's Love, you can find it on his website, spencerhixon.com, or any of the or Amazon. Do you sell it on like Barnes and Noble or anything?
Yep. It's on all those. Yep.
And also, before you go, don't forget to visit our membership site, authorsalcove.com. You can also visit us on Patreon. And we'd always love it when you give this a thumbs up, subscribe, whatever, so that way it gets this podcast can get before more writers. Again, thank you so much, Spencer. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.